I'm going to start this video off by being upfront with you. Native English-speaking learners of Spanish will always have some problem choosing between ser and estar. There will always be some nuance a native English speaker won't pick up on. But that's okay. You will always be learning a new language. There is no point when absolutely everything will be comprehensible to you. No matter how much you think you've attained a level of fluency in Spanish, when dealing with ser and estar, there will always be a moment where you're completely baffled as to why one word is used instead of the other. A native English speaker struggles with the fact that the most frequently used verb in the English language, be, has two options in Spanish. But think about it this way. Two frequently used verbs in English, do and make, are the same word in Spanish, hacer. My English students struggle with this choice between do and make well into their advanced course levels. So the native Spanish-speaking learner of English shares your pain. And it's probably something that will always carry at least a modicum of confusion for them. You should expect the same with your approach to choosing between ser and estar. When we are taught about the differences between ser and estar, the rules that dictate their use, we're always told that estar has a feeling of temporality, while ser carries with it an essential, permanent quality. There are many instances where it's pretty obvious which word we should use. One approach used by schools to learn the difference between the uses of ser and estar is through creating categories that are built into the acronyms doctor and place. For ser, we have doctor. Descriptions, occupations, characteristics, time, origins, and relationships. For estar, we have place. Position, locations, actions, conditions, emotions. When looking at the characteristics between the two expressions of be, it's understood that ser expresses a kind of permanence, describing something essential about someone or something, which are closely associated with the characteristics it has, the permanence of its origin. And while someone's occupation does seem like it could be temporary, it is a defining characteristic of what one does. Estar, on the other hand, expresses an ethereal nature, where something is in that moment, whether it's an action being done in that moment or how one feels in that moment. I guess the one confusing aspect of its use is to describe where a place is, where a city is, for instance. This would seem to carry a sense of permanence, but there are always going to be little quirks. That said, after some time studying Spanish, one starts to correctly choose between the two verbs the majority of the time. We come to learn that ella es enojada and ella está enojada are two very different ideas, with the first expressing that she is, in essence, an angry person, a person that's always angry, constantly upset. It's part of who she is. The second example, with estar, is just referring to a moment in time, a temporary emotion. She's angry now, but that's not a defining characteristic of who she is. We all have experienced the feeling of choosing the wrong verb for be in Spanish and realizing it just after we say it. It's so frustrating that something taught in basic Spanish can continue to haunt us long into our Spanish learning. I always had problems with the difference between él es correcto and él está en lo correcto. I always thought if somebody was right about something, we would just use ser. But this isn't the case. If I say es correcto, I'm talking about something essential to his being. He is a decent person. He is a good human being. But estar, in this case, expresses the temporary nature of him being correct about something. The focus here is the accuracy of the statement or judgment as opposed to the person's permanent character. One good illustration of their subtle differences can be seen in these two sentences. La fiesta fue buena and la fiesta estuvo buena. Using ser here, or the conjugated fue, is simply an overall judgment of the party. It was a good party overall. The use of estar here, or the conjugated estuvo, focuses on your personal experience, or the state of the party through your experience of it. It's more like the English "the party was fun" or enjoyable. So ser is expressing the party's intrinsic characteristic, and estar is expressing the party's temporary experience or state. What you start to notice is as your Spanish advances and you start to think about the choice between ser and estar in more complex grammatical patterns, it starts to challenge your earlier assumptions about their differences. I want you to look at two examples where the difference is not clear-cut. La ventana fue cerrada and la ventana estaba cerrada. Do you know the slight difference in meaning? What do you think? La ventana fue cerrada implies that someone shut the window. La ventana estaba cerrada implies the window was shut, but the act of shutting it itself is not really important. The state of the window at the moment is shut. Grasping this subtle difference can be difficult. The ser plus past participle is the passive voice construction focused on the agent of the action, while the estar plus past participle is the resultative or stative construction, which emphasizes the state or condition resulting from the action. So one thing we must be aware of is when we have a passive voice construction with ser, someone or something is the agent of the action. La ventana fue cerrada por la empleada. It was shut by someone, in this case, an employee. This is what I meant by it focusing a little more on the action of shutting the window. But wait, shouldn't estar focus more on the action? Isn't one of the categories of place action? This is where the understanding of the difference between ser and estar needs to be more nuanced. We actually need to think about the larger grammatical structure than just the specific qualities of ser and estar in this sentence. La ventana estaba cerrada is not a sentence concerned with the act of closing the window, or if somebody did the closing of the window. It just states the fact that it's not an open window. It's just this temporary state of being a shut window. Let's look at this example. How would you express that something is used in Spanish? Maybe a sofa or a TV or laptop. Well, the first instinct would be that this is a particular description of the object. Ese carro es usado. It would seem that being used is an essential characteristic of the car. However, in this construction, ser is expressing the passive voice, so it makes us think in the larger context. The car is being used by someone. Not that the car is used as an essential quality, the opposite of new. So we must use estar here to express its non-newness. You could conceptualize this as the temporary characteristic or temporary state of the car. The use of ser makes us take a step back and look at a larger construction at work in the sentence. Here's another interesting example. El hombre fue arrestado. El hombre estuvo arrestado. Is there a difference between the two? Nothing drastic, but there does exist a change in emphasis. Using estar here puts the emphasis on the individual state, that is, the state of being an arrested person. You can imagine this as describing a particular time in the past. He was arrested for a specific time period. Maybe now he's free. He was arrested for 3 months, and I'm expressing the temporary nature of his state at that time. While ser can express the same general idea, but it's switching the emphasis back on those doing the arresting. He was arrested by someone, maybe a police officer, a sheriff. This slight difference is obvious to the native Spanish speaker. But for the native English speaker learning Spanish, this is perplexing. We can see here how ser is connected in this passive construction to the past participle working as the agent that caused this situation. Here's another example. Él fue condenado. Él estuvo condenado. What can we surmise from these two examples? Él fue condenado might shift the focus a little more on the action, or the agent that did the condemning. Maybe a judge, maybe a jury, maybe bad luck or his actions. Remember, you can add by. Fue condenado por el juez, while estuvo condenado is his state. Adding any more information to this is unnecessary. It does in a way line up to one of the place categories. He feels condemned. It carries with it this emotional state. Maybe it's a temporary emotional state. Or maybe because we use the preterite estuvo, he was condemned for a specific time frame in the past. And we might want to shift the emphasis on time and not the action or the agent doing the action. Here's another example. Ella fue diagnosticada. Ella estuvo diagnosticada. Using fue here focuses more on the action of the doctor or nurse, medical staff, organization, institute, while using estar with the past participle might be expressing her state that might have changed. For instance, she was diagnosed with cancer, but now she's cancer-free. Estuvo diagnosticada at one time in the past, but that state has changed. In this example, we're not concerned with who did the action of diagnosing. We're just expressing her particular state at that time. We could imagine adding more information to ella fue diagnosticada. We could add por el doctor. Let's take a look at a tricky example. Look at this English sentence. The store was closed in March. This seems like a pretty straightforward sentence in English. But could there be two different meanings here? That is, does this mean that the store was closed for the month of March, temporarily? Or that the store was closed in March for good, never to reopen? Notice that regardless of the meaning, in English, we use the same construction and clarify with more information if needed. But in Spanish, this subtle difference can be expressed in the use of either ser or estar. La tienda estuvo cerrada en marzo. La tienda fue cerrada en marzo. What do you think? The first sentence being the temporary closing, and the second being closed permanently. This example does carry with it a temporary versus permanent meaning, but it depends on what you want to emphasize. If you were a little more focused on the action, that is, who closed it, the owners for instance, using fue shifts that focus to the cause. Here's an example that confused me for years. Imagine I'm showing you an art piece and I tell you that it's made of wood. Would that be es hecho de madera? Or would it be está hecho de madera? To me, at first, it seemed that wood is its essential nature, its permanent characteristic. So I always thought you would use ser. But these two sentences have very subtle differences in meaning that will help us start to clarify the different uses of ser and estar in our own Spanish. The first sentence actually carries with it extra information, and we know this by the decision to use ser in a passive construction. Let me explain. In the first sentence, the idea is that it's made of wood by someone. I could add more information to this to clarify it. Let's say we're looking at a piece of art and I say, es hecho de madera por una artista. It would make sense then. That leaves us with estar. And estar is expressing the material it is made of. This would seem to contradict many of the rules we're taught early on about the difference between ser and estar. Isn't wood in this case the permanent material, its essential quality? It would seem counterintuitive, because in the present tense, if I were to describe something made of wood as being wood, I would say, es madera. It is wood. However, in these passive constructions, estar takes over this function, because estar is not in a construction showing the cause of an action. So be careful. It's wood and it's made of wood are different. In more complex constructions, the use of ser can carry with it a more complex message. Ser plus a participle shifts the focus of the sentence. It changes its context slightly. We need to be aware of this. Ser on its own would work to express what the material is, what it's made of. However, ser plus the participle shifts the context to the action or the cause of the action. Who is doing the action? This also exposes the subtlety in meaning between the two, a subtlety that's going to take time to grasp as a native English speaker. We don't have this difference in our own language. To conclude, ser and estar are always going to be a challenge for the native English speaker. One thing that can help us is thinking about the larger construction of the sentence. Is using ser, for instance, serving some larger purpose? that is, being part of a passive construction, which calls for us to think about causes and agents. Thanks for watching.